Giovanni Battista Vanini, born in 1585 in Italy during a time when questioning faith could cost your life. He grew up brilliant, ambitious, and deeply curious about how the universe actually works. While others saw divine miracles, Vanini saw the precision of nature, storms, stars, sunlight, as evidence of a living, self-running world that didn't need constant supervision from God. He studied theology, took holy orders, and spent years debating philosophy across Europe. But his sharp tongue and fearless curiosity made him dangerous to church authorities. In works like De Admirandis Naturae Reginae de Ecce Mortalia Maricanis, 1616, he proposed that nature, not heaven, was the true source of life and order. He praised natural forces as divine in themselves and suggested that reason, not revelation, should guide understanding. To the Catholic Inquisition, that was heresy. Many read his arguments as thinly disguised atheism. Others even called him the philosopher of Satan, believing such claims could only come from the devil. After being arrested in Toulouse, France, he refused to recant. In 1919, at just 34 years old, Vanini was tried for blasphemy and atheism, had his tongue torn out, and was burned at the stake, his last words reportedly thanking the fire for revealing truth. His death shocked Europe, turning him into both villain and martyr. Later Enlightenment thinkers viewed him as one of the first openly naturalistic philosophers, centuries ahead of science that would one day confirm many of his instincts. Vanini's story isn't about satanic worship. It's about how rebellion against blind authority can look like evil to those who fear change. In defending reason and the beauty of nature, he became one of history's first martyrs for freedom of thought, a man punished not for sin, but for asking how, instead of simply saying Amen.
Baruch Spinoza, born in 1632 in Amsterdam to a community of Portuguese Jewish refugees who had fled the Inquisition. Brilliant and quiet, he grew up studying religion, Hebrew, and philosophy, but his questions quickly outgrew orthodoxy. He asked how a divine being could operate outside nature and whether miracles truly broke its laws. By his 20s, Spinoza's answers terrified religious leaders. He wrote that God and nature are the same reality, an infinite, unbroken substance containing all existence. In this vision, there's no devil, no heaven, no outside plan, only the endless order of nature itself. To him, good and evil were perspectives, not cosmic forces. For saying so, his synagogue expelled him with a rare and brutal curse. Yet exile freed him. Working as a lens grinder, he composed Ethics, a book that would later revolutionize philosophy. He argued that understanding nature equals loving God, because they're one. Today, physicists and secular humanists see in Spinoza an early blueprint for scientific materialism. In his century, though, those same ideas earned him nicknames like the atheist Jew and Satan's favorite rationalist. Ironically, the man condemned for denying God shaped Einstein's own concept of a God who does not play dice. Spinoza's calm defiance made him a quiet revolutionary, proving that questioning the divine need not come from hatred, but from an irresistible wish to understand the universe truthfully.
William Blake, born in London in 1757, was a poet, artist, printer, and visionary. While most of his age worshipped reason, he trusted imagination as the voice of eternity. In The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, he delivered one of the most daring lines in English literature. The reason Milton wrote in fetters when he wrote of angels, and at liberty when he wrote of devils, is because he was of the devil's party without knowing it. To Blake, Satan symbolized creative energy, rebellion against sterile obedience. Heaven and hell weren't opposites to be chosen between, but forces that needed balance, reason and desire, order and imagination. Conformity, not sin, was his true enemy. He lived in poverty, selling hand-colored prints nobody yet understood. But the worlds he painted, fiery angels, bound gods, builders of mind and cosmos, were philosophical manifestos. By turning the devil into art's patron saint, he reinvented Satan as a symbol of liberation. Blake died in 1827, still misunderstood, but by the 20th century, his infernal wisdom inspired generations, from beat poets to rock lyricists and modern mystics. His message still hums beneath modern culture. Creation demands rebellion, and even within the darkest image may burn the brightest spark of the divine.
Percy Bysshe Shelley, born in 1792 in England, was both poet and revolutionary spirit. He grew up in privilege but rejected nearly everything his world stood for: politics, religion, even polite poetry. At Oxford, he distributed a pamphlet called The Necessity of Atheism and was expelled for it. That was the start of his lifelong war with authority. Shelley saw Satan not as evil, but as freedom's banner. In his poem Prometheus Unbound, he reimagined the mythic rebel who defies the gods to give fire to humankind. For Shelley, this wasn't blasphemy. It was moral heroism. Both Prometheus and Satan stood for intellect and compassion standing up to tyranny. He wrote that the truly virtuous man appears to be the enemy of mankind, because challenging injustice always looks wicked to the comfortable. His social writings, the defense of vegetarianism, women's rights, and nonviolence, were as radical as his verse. Shelley drowned off the Italian coast at 29, but his ideas lived on. Later, freethinkers and humanists treated him as a prophet of secular idealism, a voice preaching that knowledge and love, not fear, define our humanity. His Satan was never a monster, only the mirror of human courage to stand against unjust power.
Friedrich Nietzsche, born in 1844 in Germany, tore apart the moral map of the West. God is dead, he wrote, not as triumph, but as diagnosis. A society built on faith had lost its center. Instead of collapse, he demanded renewal. Humans must become their own creators of values. Nietzsche's admiration for pride, strength, and honesty made him the modern era's most misunderstood moralist. He despised hypocrisy more than piety, and his radical honesty sounded satanic to those who needed commandments. Where religion saw humility, he saw weakness. Where it saw sin, he saw vitality. In works like Beyond Good and Evil and Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche imagined the Übermensch, the human who rises above herd morality to shape meaning from within. He celebrated rebellion not as evil, but as evolution. Though he never worshipped any devil, his insistence that humans replace divine law with self-made truth redefined the concept of blasphemy. Later artists and philosophers turned him into the patron saint of existential courage, a thinker showing that the fall from heaven might actually be a step toward freedom. Fyodor Dostoyevsky, born in 1821 in Moscow, didn't praise Satan, he explored him. A devout but tormented Christian, he spent years in exile and hard labor for revolutionary ties, experiences that shaped his obsession with good and evil. In The Brothers Karamazov, the character Ivan confronts the Grand Inquisitor, declaring that if God allows innocent suffering, rebellion is moral. In another vision, Ivan meets the devil himself, not fiery, but calm, witty, almost human, a projection of conscience without faith. Dostoevsky gave evil an intellectual voice. For him, the satanic wasn't demonic possession, but reason without compassion, a cold brilliance cut off from love. He showed that denying divine authority leads to unbearable freedom, and through that freedom comes either redemption or ruin. His internal duel between faith and skepticism influenced everyone from Camus to Freud. Readers still wrestle with his central question: if there is no higher judge, what stops us from chaos? Dostoevsky's answer was both haunting and hopeful. Only the love we choose for others redeems us from becoming our own devils.
Charles Baudelaire, born in Paris in 1821, lived as if art itself were a sin worth committing. His book Les Fleurs du Mal, The Flowers of Evil, transformed poetry into something modern, sensual, and scandalous. He wrote of desire, decay, and rebellion with a beauty so vivid that censors prosecuted him for obscenity in 1857. 6 poems were banned for nearly a century. Baudelaire's Satan wasn't a horned beast, it was the spirit of defiance and artistic clarity. He called the devil the most knowledgeable of theologians, seeing in him humanity's courage to face the world without illusions. For Baudelaire, art was a negotiation with darkness, the mind diving into vice to rescue fragments of truth. Critics called him a corrupter. Later generations named him the father of modern poetry. From Poe to the Surrealists, every artist who found beauty in taboo traces a line to Baudelaire. His hells were inner landscapes of addiction and melancholy, showing that creativity and damnation are sometimes born in the same fire.
Eliphas Lévi. Born Alphonse Louis Constant in Paris in 1810, began as a seminary student preparing for the priesthood. But his curiosity for symbolism and mysticism pulled him beyond theology into the world of esoteric philosophy. He became one of the 19th century's foundational occult thinkers, author of Dogma et Rituel de la Haute Magie, 1854, where he introduced his famous drawing of Baphomet. Contrary to legend, Lévi's Baphomet wasn't satanic evil. It was a symbol of balance, male and female, light and dark, intellect and instinct. His central idea was that divine and infernal are 2 halves of one cosmic truth. To understand creation, you need to embrace both. The church condemned his writings, but his philosophy quietly shaped Western mysticism. Modern groups, Rosicrucians, Thelemites, even popular culture depictions of the occult draw directly from Lévi's imagery. His Baphomet became the misunderstood icon of the goat-headed figure, proof that one man's metaphor for equilibrium can become another's emblem of blasphemy.
Aleister Crowley. Born in 1875 in Leamington Spa, England, grew up the son of strict fundamentalists and spent his life fighting their god. A brilliant mountaineer, chess player, and poet, he transformed himself into the Great Beast 666. To his followers, he was a prophet. To critics, a madman. Crowley founded the philosophy of Thelema, centered on one command: do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It wasn't chaos, it meant discovering your true will, the purpose written into your being, and living it without shame. He mixed Western magic, Egyptian symbols, yoga, and psychology into an experimental spirituality decades ahead of his time. His rituals and writings scandalized Britain. Tabloids branded him the wickedest man in the world. Yet artists from W.B. Yeats to Led Zeppelin found inspiration in his fearless exploration of consciousness. When Crowley died in 1947, few realized how far his influence would travel, from modern occultism to counterculture philosophy and even pop symbolism. He turned Satanism into something intellectual, not worship of evil, but defiance against hypocrisy and the courage to become one's own law.
Anton LaVey, born in Chicago in 1930 and raised in California, a showman with a carnival past and a lifelong fascination with human behavior. In 1966, he founded the Church of Satan and wrote the Satanic Bible, a book that would make him one of the most polarizing figures of the 20th century. LaVey's Satan wasn't a deity. It was a metaphor for individualism. His creed praised self-interest, indulgence, and reason over guilt and submission. He stripped old superstitions away and replaced it with ritual theater designed to dramatize freedom. Each ceremony was psychological, not supernatural. At the height of the 1960s counterculture, his black-walled church in San Francisco attracted celebrities and skeptics alike. Newspaper headlines screamed, "Sect of the Devil," but LaVey calmly gave television interviews explaining that Satan merely symbolized honest human nature, our instincts, pride, and passion, without apology. Critics mocked him as a showman, yet his non-theistic Satanism shaped a global subculture. Modern groups still quote his tenets because he made rebellion philosophical rather than violent. By turning fear of the devil into a lesson in self-knowledge, LaVey became the face of rational Satanism.
and proved that sometimes theater can carry the sharpest truth.
Michael A. Aquino, born in 1946 in California, was an officer in the U.S. Army and a psychological operations specialist before becoming one of the most controversial figures in modern occult history. A member of LaVey's Church of Satan, he split away in 1975 to found the Temple of Set, named after the ancient Egyptian god of isolation and individual will. Aquino's philosophy moved beyond LaVey's performative atheism. He proposed true self-deification, that humans could become conscious creators by separating their inner essence, the black flame, from the larger current of nature. This isolate intelligence was his version of spiritual evolution. Highly educated and decorated military officer, Aquino used academic tone in his writings like the Book of Coming Forth by Night and Mind War. Misinterpretations and rumors about his occult life drew decades of media attention, but no charges of wrongdoing ever stuck. He remained devoted to the temple until his death in 2019, positioning it as a philosophy of self-responsibility, rational magic, and spiritual independence. Aquino turned the notion of evil into self-knowledge, a cold, disciplined journey to master the shadow without being consumed by it.
Peter J. Carroll, born in England in 1953, ushered in a new era of chaotic spiritual philosophy called chaos magic. While not a Satanist in ritual form, his work descends directly from LaVey and Crowley, turning sorcery into an experiment in psychology and willpower. In his books Liber Null and Psychonaut, 1978 to 1981, Carroll taught that belief itself is a tool. You can adopt and discard faith systems at will to create change in the world and in yourself. Instead of worshiping deities, practitioners treat rituals as laboratories for the mind, openly embracing paradox. Where traditional occultism sought order and hierarchy, Carroll celebrated uncertainty. He merged quantum physics, psychology, and performance art into a living system of magic for the postmodern age. His movement spread worldwide, fueling the 90s chaos culture that shaped underground music and digital philosophy. By teaching that rules are illusions and will is limitless, Carroll embodied the satanic principle of self-determination without ever needing a devil to symbolize it.
Marquis de Sade, Don-Étienne Alphonse François, better known as the Marquis de Sade, was born in 1740 into French nobility and scandal. A soldier-turned-writer, he lived through the chaos of the French Revolution and spent nearly half of his life imprisoned for crimes of blasphemy, obscenity, and assault. While his name inspired the word sadism, his deeper rebellion was philosophical, not just erotic. Sade's works like Justine and the 120 Days of Sodom described cruelty not for thrill, but as a mirror of power itself. He argued that nature is indifferent, pleasure is amoral, and moral laws are inventions of the weak to control the strong. In his view, the universe has no divine judge. Humans are free to follow impulse, however dark. To his age, that sounded satanic, deliberate worship of vice. But Sade's real target was hypocrisy, priests preaching purity while chasing pleasure. Behind the shock sat a materialist logic. If there's no soul, no afterlife, then all good and evil happen here, among bodies. Condemned by every institution of his time, Sade still shaped future ethics debates about freedom, censorship, and human desire. Modern thinkers from Simone de Beauvoir to Foucault treated him as a bleak prophet of autonomy, a man who dared ask what morality means when heaven falls silent.
Jean-Paul Sartre, born in Paris in 1905, never invoked demons, but his existentialism carried a Luciferic courage. Humans have no pre-written purpose. We must invent one. In Being and Nothingness, 1943, Sartre declared that existence comes before essence, meaning we appear first and define ourselves later. To believers, that sounded like rebellion against divine design. Sartre accepted the charge. Without God, he said, we are condemned to be free. Every choice shapes the world, and refusal to choose is itself a choice. The hell he described wasn't fire, but the gaze of others constantly judging us. He championed freedom with responsibility. Actions matter because nothing else will save us. That fearless autonomy linked him, symbolically, to the Satanic archetype, defiantly standing alone, creating meaning without higher permission. Sartre's ideas fueled art, politics, and youth culture from the 1940s to the present. By turning godless freedom into moral urgency, he showed that even without heaven or hell, our decisions carry absolute weight.
Camille Paglia, born in 1947 in New York, entered cultural theory like a lightning strike, half classicist, half provocateur. As a professor and critic, she argued that Western art owes more to pagan and demonic energies than to polite moral order. In her landmark book, Sexual Personae, 1990, she wrote that civilization is built on repressed nature, the wild, erotic, often violent power symbolized in myths from Dionysus to Lucifer. To Paglia, the artist channels chaos the way ancient magicians once did. Creative genius always borders on heresy. She calls herself an atheist, but defends religion's imagery, especially the satanic archetype of rebellion and beauty. Her essays celebrate icons who defied convention, from Michelangelo to Madonna, presenting them as heirs to that ancient, fiery spirit. Paglia's influence stretches across gender theory, art criticism, and the debate over freedom of expression. She recasts Satanism not as worship of evil, but as the recognition that creativity and darkness share the same source. In her eyes, to ignore that truth is to deny half of what makes humanity brilliant and dangerous and fully alive.